This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Mark Martin. We begin with a sharp uptick in COVID-19 cases in parts of the country, while other areas see a dramatic dip. Currently, more than 2 million Americans have contracted the virus and 118,000 have died from it. New reports show 9 states, including Florida, Texas, and Arizona, hit record numbers of cases, while cases in northeastern states like New York and New Jersey have plummeted. Overall, the number of cases nationwide is up slightly, while deaths nationwide are down. President Trump says the country is moving in the right direction.
It's fading away. It's going to fade away, but having a vaccine would be really nice, and that's going to happen.
The president is set to hold a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma tomorrow night at an indoor arena. The campaign will be handing out masks and hand sanitizer, but will not require people to use them. And CBN's medical reporter Lori Johnson is here now to help us sort it all out. Welcome, Lori.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Is it fair to say that a person's political views influence their perception of the pandemic?
You know, we're not really seeing this with medical professionals, people who are on the COVID-19 task force and other doctors and people who are well informed in the medical profession. But sadly, we're seeing among a lot of politicians and, again, sadly, in the news media, a lot of political preferences. Remember, Mark, the presidential election is only 19 weeks from now. That's only 4.5 months. So many of the things that are being talked about these days have a political bent to them. And I'm not just talking about COVID-19, but almost everything. This is a very hotly debated presidential election, and people have chosen sides. So when we talk about COVID-19, we know some things for certain. For example, that it will hurt the president's chance of re-election the worse the economy is. And the more closures you have, the worse the economy is. And so you see people generally who favor President Trump being reelected really wanting more reopenings. And the opposite is true. We see people who would rather not see the president reelected really pushing for these closures and saying it is in the name of COVID-19. The same thing is true with the rally this weekend. You have a lot of people who do not favor President Trump as far as re-election, saying that this is dangerous. It puts the people who are attending the rally at risk. And yet, these same people were saying that the protests and other types of rallies that have gone on the last couple weeks were okay. And so you see this back and forth a lot. But, you know, the medical professionals are pretty much saying the same thing, which is masks work. People should take precautions when they are out in public. And also, in addition to the masks and hand sanitizers, people at the rally are going to be having their temperatures taken. And so the masks do work. So whether you favor opening or closing, those masks really do protect people. So that's a positive thing.
Let's talk more about COVID itself. What number is more important, Lori, the number of cases or the number of hospitalizations?
Great question. When we see the number of cases go up, this is something that the coronavirus task force said would happen the more we had testing. Testing has improved 100% in the last couple of months. So we are seeing more people being tested, and that is largely the reason we're seeing more cases, although we are seeing more hospitalizations in some places, and that's what we really need to look at, the number of hospitalizations. Remember when we were so concerned at the very beginning of this pandemic, the main concern, flattening the curve, was all about not overwhelming our healthcare system. And so even though we are seeing some hospitalizations increase, we're not seeing any healthcare systems saying that they are overwhelmed, that they don't have enough resources. Remember, we were so concerned about having to ration care and people not getting ventilators. Now we have so many ventilators, we're actually giving them to other countries who don't have enough. So we're really not at risk of overwhelming the healthcare system at that point, thank God.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, our medical reporter, Lori Johnson. Thank you, Lori.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
The Oklahoma Supreme Court, actually in other news, Atlanta police officers are calling out sick in protest of murder charges against a fellow officer and assault for another in the shooting death of Rayshard Brooks. The interim chief acknowledged members of the force also feel abandoned amid protests demanding massive changes to policing. 27-year-old Garrett Rolfe faces 11 charges, including murder, and turned himself in yesterday. Officer Devin Brosnan also turned himself in, but is now out on $50,000 bail. He's facing assault charges. They responded to a call for a man asleep in a Wendy's drive-thru. They later discovered Brooks was intoxicated, and what started out calm ended up with Rolfe shooting Brooks as he fled after a struggle with both officers. Brosnan described their initial 40-minute interaction.
I felt he was friendly. He was respectful. I was respectful to him. And I felt like, he seemed like someone who potentially needed my help. And I was really just there to see what I could do for him and make sure that he was safe.
Brosnan's lawyers say his client will cooperate and tell the truth. 155 years ago today, slaves along the Gulf Coast of Texas finally learned they were free. It's a day that's come to be called Juneteenth, and as America confronts race relations, it's becoming a much more important holiday to recognize, but many Americans don't know much about it. Jennifer Wishon offers a history lesson.
Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation that freed slaves in January of 1863. 2.5 years later, on June 19, 1865, the news finally reached Galveston, Texas. A Union general read the order aloud. All slaves are free.
Essentially, slavery ended on that day.
Newly freed people celebrated at their church.
It's really been a story that Galveston has been able to try to get out for years.
The day became known as Juneteenth.
Juneteenth is actually the day that African Americans can celebrate their independence. So, with all of the conversation around racial equality and justice in the United States, a lot of people are turning to Juneteenth as a symbol, as a way they can celebrate and honor the sacrifices that African Americans have made.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now! The police killing of George Floyd and the protests that followed have raised the holiday's profile. Now a number of businesses are declaring it a holiday, including Nike, Twitter, and Target. Some states are doing the same.
I'm going to sign an executive order today, hence all my pens, recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday for state employees.
Inside the U.S. Capitol, Speaker Nancy Pelosi ordered the removal of portraits of former speakers who were members of the Confederacy.
So this is why more and more people are talking about it, because frankly, a lot of people didn't know it exists.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
In major cities across America, one organization is working around the clock to establish a refuge for urban teens and teen parents amid the unrest of violent protests and financial effects from the pandemic. Joining us now is Daniel Sanabria of Youth for Christ. He's the executive director in New York City. Daniel, your organization works with pregnant teens and teen parents to help lead them to Jesus. How have things been in 2020 with the protests and pandemic? Have there been additional challenges?
Yeah, I mean, our ministry is all about connecting one-on-one and doing ministry face-to-face, so we can't do that here in New York City. As you know, it was a center of the coronavirus, so there's many challenges, but there's many different ways to reach our young people and the young girls and the kids we work in the jails that we work with.
What are the ways that Youth for Christ is helping provide for teens and guide them toward Jesus?
I mean, we used to go, we're in the facilities every single week, but from a distance. And so as we've been doing it for 4 years, going in and sending mentors and being one-on-one mentors with these kids, sharing the gospel, doing Bible studies with them, it's been exciting to see. But from a distance, we can't really do that one-on-one. But we've been doing Zoom calls. Thank God for technology. Thank God for those areas that we can go directly to them, phone calls, text messages, drive by with our cars and go and visit them in certain neighborhoods to tell them, hey, we're still with you. We still love you. Let's go forward. Let's do this together. And so we're providing them food. We're providing them resources, educational things. Every single day we have to have a contact with them because they're going to forget and they're going to go into their own world. And it's pretty hard, especially in quarantine.
What are the biggest struggles in reaching New York City youth right now? Let's focus specifically on your city.
The biggest struggle to reach, I think we need the Bible clearly says the harvest is plenty, right? But the workers are few. I think the most important thing for us is to get the church involved and understand that the church has a calling to get out of their four walls, right? And I know we can't do that now in a sense, but we need to be creative to go and reach these young people in their local schools and their community parks. Being intentional, have a conversation, being consistent with these young people. I truly believe that if we disciple the young people, if we walk with them and share the gospel, I think the next generation has a better chance and don't have to deal with the things that we're dealing with today if we train them, help them, guide them, lead them in the gospel.
How can churches, Daniel, in New York City and other cities step in to make a difference? What can the church do?
I mean, the church needs to educate themselves in a sense of what the issues are going on, especially young people. The crime rate, the lack of education, the lack of mentoring, the lack of tutoring, especially in the neighborhoods that are being hit pretty hard. A lot of these neighborhoods that we work with are low income, and they need a lot of support. Now, there's churches all over New York City. I mean, this is a big city, but there's a lot of churches in New York. And I think that if they educate themselves to understand that if we can just do another step, another obedience to the call of God, training more leaders, training more young people, I think that's the way to really reach these kids. These kids are dying for relationship. Yes, they have social media, but they're alone. And if we can go out there and do what Jesus did, go and walk with them and have authentic Christ-sharing relationship, man, I think we can make a big difference.
That's awesome. Awesome to hear. Thank you for your work that you're doing there, Daniel. Daniel Sanabria of Youth for Christ. Blessings to you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Coming up, tensions are rising between China and India, what it could mean for the region moving forward. But before we go to break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
You're watching CBN NewsWatch. Tensions between India and China are increasing after violent clashes broke out between Indian Army soldiers and Chinese troops high in the Himalayan mountains. 20 Indian soldiers died and more than 76 were injured on Monday when the two sides fought each other along the disputed border region of Ladakh. Since the early 60s, two of the world's largest militaries have fought over remote areas of the Himalayas. The two countries have accused each other of crossing a poorly marked border, leading to several incidents. This was the deadliest skirmish in 45 years, and some fear could lead to a new flashpoint in South Asia. India dispatched additional troops to the region, and its Air Force is reportedly on high alert following the clashes. Senior international correspondent George Thomas joins us now with more. George, tensions between China and India, they've been simmering for months now along that disputed border region. What's going on? Break it down for us.
Yeah, well, we just saw footage of the majestic Himalayan mountains, and this is a no man's land. I mean, Mark, this is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Why? Because you're talking about 19,000 feet above sea level. It is bitterly cold, very, very cold, very harsh terrain. And so since the early 60s, China and India, that was when they had the last war. And it was really about the strategic region between India and China. And they've been fighting over this border, this line of what they call line of actual control. The Indians would like to say that this line of actual control is between 3,000 to 4,000 miles long. The Chinese have said since the 1960s, whoa, hold up. No, it's not. It's only 2,000 miles long. And so they've been going back and forth. And so things kind of heated up in May when the Chinese accused the Indians of making these side roads, kind of like off-ramps, Mark, very close to the LAC, the line of actual control. The Indians accused the Chinese of saying, hey, listen, you guys are moving your men closer and closer to this sort of porous border. And then obviously on Monday, what happened was that you saw the skirmish between these two countries. The first time, as you mentioned, in 45 years.
Let's go back to 1996. There's an agreement that actually prevents each side from carrying guns and other weapons.
Yeah, pretty well,
so
right?
how did so many Indian soldiers die? And do we know how many Chinese were lost?
It is called hand-to-hand combat. I mean, these guys basically beat the can I say bejeebies? Beat the bejeebies out of each other. I mean, literally, they used rods, sticks, stones, because as you mentioned, back in 1996, both countries agreed because of just how dangerous this part of the world is, they were not going to carry any weapons, any guns, any other kinds of artillery and so forth. So it was hand-to-hand combat, literally. And in fact, because of the terrain, there are these steep drops. A number of the Indian soldiers perished by just falling off the cliff, so to speak. Now, the Indians say that 20 of their men died, about 76 got injured. Just imagine, hand-to-hand, face-to-face, you're beating each other up because they don't have weapons. The Chinese haven't officially come out and said how many of their men died in the process.
All of this comes as the Chinese continue to hold large-scale military drills not too far from the region, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got some really cool video that we can show of the Chinese launching these military exercises very close, as you mentioned, Mark, to this LAC line of control. Again, it's just the Chinese saying, listen, hey, we would like to be seen as an emerging superpower in the region, and we just want to let you know that we're in your neighborhood, and don't try any funny business. We've got the artillery, the various technology to carry out attacks and so forth, and to protect our border. But also keep in mind, this is also very strategic, because if you look at it, in some ways, India, this skirmish in some ways paints a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that the Indians would like to have closer relations with the United States. The Chinese don't like that prospect. The idea of having a major ally of the United States in their neighborhood kind of perturbs them. And so the Chinese are trying to drive a wedge between the U.S. and the Indians in the process. But the reality is that historically, India has had very, very close relations with the United States, from trade to economy to military, and the Indians would like to continue that. So this is sort of also larger strategic interests that are playing out right there on the beautiful, majestic steppes of the Himalayas.
And quickly, how are the Indians reacting to this skirmish? And talk about the concern about this becoming a new flashpoint.
I mean, potentially, yeah, but I don't see, Mark, a war in this part, because it's just very difficult. It's so cold. It's very difficult to fight a war on the Himalayas. But, Indians have been protesting. Some have been saying, how much, should we maybe boycott Chinese goods and so forth. And, they're very upset that they lost their men. But obviously, and I think in the next couple of days, things will try to cool down. And both the Chinese and Indians are trying to say, hey, whoa, back up. Let's relax a little bit.
Okay. Our senior international correspondent, George Thomas. Thank you, George.
You're welcome. Thank you.
After the break, how a new discovery in Israel shines light on everyday life for people during Jesus' time on the earth.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to Newswatch. A new discovery in Israel reveals more about how people lived during the time of Jesus. As Chris Mitchell reports, it involves an underground system located in an unusual place.
Even though the Western Wall remains under COVID-19 restrictions, archaeologists are still at work. This latest dig deep underneath the entrance to the Western Wall tunnels uncovered a unique treasure dating back to the time of Jesus. From the outside, this might look like any modern white door, but open it up, and it's a gateway into history. Like much of Jerusalem, one civilization is built on another. It's even carved into the bedrock.
Most of the buildings that we know from this time period were stone built, were on the street level. And in here we're finding, this really impressive and unique rock cut system.
The rock cut system from Second Temple times was completely covered by a Byzantine-era mosaic floor that was part of a monumental public structure built about 1,400 years ago. It was renovated about 150 years later.
Last January, we started to excavate and we started to dismantle the mosaic itself in order to find the earlier remains to this building.
Dr. Barak Monakandam Givon, the site's co-director, says archaeologists noticed a great attention to detail in the subterranean structure.
And those details showed us that this system was used on a daily basis. It may have been used as a pantry, so people stored their grocery or olive oil or wheat and barley, or what is more possible, that it was used, for daily life. People actually lived here.
The site is located about half a football field from the Temple Mount and only 40 feet from the huge bridge that connected ancient uptown Jerusalem to the Temple Mount.
Basically, what we have here is a window to the way the women, men, and children of ancient Jerusalem during the time of the temple lived. And we're finding here a very unique way of living that was not really familiar to archaeologists working on this time period or in this area.
Artifacts from the dig also attest to the Jewish history here, like this chalk cup. Other finds included the rim of a huge, expensive pot, like the one at the wedding in Cana when Jesus turned the water into wine. The revelation came on the eve of the Jerusalem Day anniversary, when Israel reunited the city and regained control over the Temple Mount just 53 years ago. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, underground near the Western Wall, Jerusalem.
Fascinating story. You can catch the latest Jerusalem Dateline with Chris Mitchell tonight at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Up next, newlywed Sadie Robertson is sharing advice with her fans, the encouraging words she has for young adults in today's culture.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Former Duck Dynasty star Sadie Robertson is hoping to encourage her fans to follow God's path as they navigate dating in today's society. Robertson and her new husband, Christian Huff, got married in November after 9 months of dating. Both in their early 20s, the young couple recently opened up to fans about their unpure pasts, but shared how when they met each other, they let their faith lead the relationship. Robertson says she felt shame in past relationships, but never in this one because they handled it, quote, God's way. Robertson told fans in an Instagram post, "Why am I saying all this? Because I care about you. I don't want you all to only see examples of couples living all fun and being fooled into thinking God's way isn't as fun or attractive as the world's. God's way is the most fun because it's not tied to shame." Well said, Sadie Robertson. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, be sure to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. Or you can talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a blessed weekend and a great day.